Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the October meeting of the Executive Scrutiny Board. Hopefully you're all familiar with the new PA system we've got to the present time. It's just making sure you turn it off, as I often forget to do when you finish speaking, and turn it on before you do speak. Any apologies, please? I have none at the moment. Thank you.
Councillor Ralston is stuck in traffic because the M1's closed, but she's on her way. Okay,
thank you very much for that. Thank you. Any others? Okay, none. Any declarations of interest? If there are none, moving on to item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of September. You've all had copies of those. Is there anything that's urgent from those that anybody wishes to raise? Please shout now. If not, moving on to item 5, sorry, Lucy, is this regard to item 4?
It's just to approve them on the way past. Just to approve the minutes on the way past.
Okay. Can I take the minutes as... item 5, the forward plan. You've also had copies of that. Any issues? Lucy?
This is an interesting one, Chair. This is a sort of strategic issue about forward plans, because I looked at this one and noted that on page 3, where we have changes since the last forward plan, there were 3 items that went to our last meeting: compulsory purchase of empty homes, family hubs grant allocation, and send external support delivery, all of which had only actually gone into the forward plan in August. And then of the new ones that we've got coming in, we've got Castle Ward, which we've got tonight. We've got the establishment of the Joint Executive Committee for the ICP, which is going tonight. And then we have discretionary channel. So of these 7 items that we've got on this page, 5 of them, people have had one cycle, 1 month to look at. Now, within our constitution, that's fine. 28 days is all it has to be on the forward plan before a decision is taken. But most of our themed themed scrutiny boards only meet 4 times a year, once every 3 months. So as part of the cycle, most people will not have seen these items before a decision has been taken on them. And I just think it's poor practice not to have got these items on the forward plan a little bit earlier, to have given more chance for items to be pulled up for scrutiny by our specialist boards if they so wished to do it. And if other people, some of whom are chairs of those boards, wished to support me, I'd be very happy to just do a nudge to officers to ask for items to go onto the forward plan as early as practicable rather than at the last moment.
Thank you. Am I on now? I haven't. Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you. I'm chair of the Adults and Health Scrutiny Board, as you may know. I very much take Councillor Kerr's point. There is an issue about finding out what is happening where within the council, and I think it's good practice to give more advance notice of decisions. However, I think that there needs to be a reasonable time allowed for decisions to come in a way that makes the council run efficiently. And if 28 days has been deemed sufficient previously, I suspect it is sufficient, and we need that shorter timescale so that because we can't preempt 6 months in advance decision making that may need to be made more rapidly. So I don't mind giving officers a nudge, but only in relation to issues that might have been shared anyway, not in relation to anything that requires urgent and rapid decision making. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. As both Councillor Kerr and Councillor Martin have alluded to, the constitutional and legal requirement for advance notice of key decisions is 28 days. The same applies for executive decisions that are made in private session. And I think it's also important to emphasise that the fall plan, when it is published each month, is circulated to all councillors. And obviously councillors have rights within our standing orders within the Constitution to raise matters for inclusion on the work programmes and agendas of scrutiny boards. So that information is being routinely circulated to councillors. Obviously, in the context of this meeting, scrutiny takes place before decisions are made, but in a lot of circumstances, scrutiny review boards review decisions after the fact. But if there is something that presents itself on the fall plan that is of such significance to councillors that they feel a meeting of a scrutiny review board is required, we would happily consider extraordinary meetings if necessary. And as I say, there is nothing to preclude items that are included on the fall plan being sent to a committee chair, a scrutiny chair, for inclusion on their future work programmes as well.
Thank you, Alex. We've heard Councillor Kerr's concerns and Councillor Martin's response, and also Alex. Is there anything else that any other member wishes to say? If not, thank you very much for that.
Chair?
Lucy. I mean, if you will indicate, because I do want to move on, then please go on.
That's fine. It's just that my point was not wanting to hold things up, but where items should be available sooner for us to be, for the public and for scrutiny and for all members to be able to identify that sooner. So, for example, of this list, purchase of empty homes is something that we have quite frequently, and we could almost have that as a standing item rather than for it to appear and be crossed off and appear again. I don't remember when the Family Hubs grant allocation came in, was available, or the send information, though I think that was longer ago. But Castle Ward purchase order, well, that could have come to us sooner because that has been something that's been scheduled and known about for several years, in principle. And the establishment of the Joint Executive Committee, that was legislation that went through in July, I think it said in the paper, so it could have been put in earlier. Because
Lucy, if I can interject, I'm getting shakes of heads. We've got an explanation from the Constitutional Officer. I understand, I think, your concerns, but I think those concerns have been addressed. Does anybody else wish to contribute?
Chair, constitutionally...
Because I do want to get on with the meeting tonight, Sir Councillor Kerr.
Chair, constitutionally, I agree there is no issue. It is done correctly according to our constitution. What I'm asking for is officers to be mindful, to be helpful to scrutiny, to make it easier for scrutiny to be more effective without requiring additional officer input, which would be required if there was going to be an urgent meeting.
I think yeah, I'll bring you in a second, Alison. I think Alex has explained that the opportunity for any of us to bring items forward. Let me bring Alex in, and then I'll bring you in, Alison. Alex.
Councillor Kerr, I think I'd agree with your essential point is that it is sensible for items to be included on the fall plan as soon as they are reasonably known about, and that is something that we promote through our internal report writing guidance and the training that we offer to colleagues on our constituted processes and report writing. So in essence, yes, colleagues should be putting items on the fall plan as soon as practically possible, and we're happy to echo that through the training that we offer to counterparts across the council.
Alex has taken your nudge, Lucy. Alison, you sure? Okay. All right. Okay. Now, before I move on, you're not going to suddenly put your hand up, Lucy, are you? No. Okay, thank you. Item 6, Council Cabinet responses to scrutiny recommendations. We've had copies of that. Does anybody wish to speak on that before I move on to the next item? No? Okay, moving on to the Council Cabinet proper. The first item on the agenda proper is, apart from the recommendations on number 7 from the Executive Scrutiny Board, is item 8, the establishment of a joint executive committee within Derbyshire County Council for the Derby and Derbyshire Integrated Partnership. Is it yourself, Alison? Thank you, Alison.
Yes, Chair, I'll take us briefly through the report that's going to Cabinet, and then Alex will, I think, add in as necessary or required. So, I mean, it is quite a detailed report, but I will take us just briefly through some of the headlines as you've picked up, Councillor Kerr. The paper is essentially seeking support to establish the Integrated Care Partnership as a joint committee of both Derby and Derbyshire County Councils alongside the Integrated Care Board So the Health and Care Act of 2022 established the integrated care systems as of July of this year. The integrated care system are made up of two functions or two structures, the first of which is the Integrated Care Board, or the ICB, and that's a statutory NHS organisation which is responsible for the provision of healthcare services within the locality, and essentially they are also taking on the responsibilities, the commissioning responsibilities of the clinical commissioning groups, the CCGs, that were disestablished at the end of June with the establishment of the integrated care boards in July. The other element of the integrated care system are the integrated care partnerships, of which the paper is fundamentally about. The partnerships are concerned with improving the health and well-being of the local population, and the local population for the integrated care systems is that of Derby and Derbyshire locally, so covering the whole patch of both Derby and Derbyshire. And they've got a statutory responsibility to produce an integrated care strategy, which they're currently on with now. So essentially, the paper gives a little bit more detail about both the integrated care boards and the integrated care partnership, but also a brief overview of the health and wellbeing boards, which under the Act there's no significant changes to the health and wellbeing boards, so they will kind of remain in place and will remain statutory committees of the council, and also the scrutiny arrangements also remain the same under the Act. So the board will be seeking the approval of Cabinet for recommendations 2.1 to 2.7, of which there's a kind of mix of elements to note, but also requesting approval for agreement to establish the Integrated Care Partnership as a joint committee, of which is a statutory requirement, but also seeking approval of the terms of reference of the Integrated Care Partnership and the agreed membership kind of set out within there. Probably also to note in addition is the hosting of the Integrated Care Partnership. We're proposing that Derbyshire Council host the arrangements within the partnership. I think probably that's as much as I'd want to go through, Chair, unless there's anything specific you wanted to add.
Thank you, Alison. I'll make a few comments before I bring other people in. I mean, certainly it's really a question not directed at yourself, Alison, but it's about what's behind these proposals, and it's me speculating, because I and a lot of other people want to know what real positive difference will this integrated care partnership actually make to scarce and reducing resources in the health and social care field, because we see resources diminishing, and with all the gloomy economic predictions, which have got worse since that infamous, well, it wasn't a budget, was it, but sort of a statement that was actually made, it looks as though we're going to be facing further cuts. So I suppose it's looking at, you know, sort of, and one person said to me, is this really rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic? I mean, I don't know if you're able to offer any hope to those cynical, sceptical people, myself included, when we see resources diminishing, people being rationed for what care they can actually receive. Will this make a difference, do you think, Alison, or is it too early to tell? Thank you.
I think it's probably, it's early days for the arrangements. Obviously, they're only kind of formally established from July of this year, but I think the intention is clearly to look at the opportunities around integration in terms of health and social care, and looking at it collectively rather than looking at NHS provision and wider care separately. So looking at the opportunities for integration, and looking at also opportunities in terms of how absolutely that scarce resource is utilised as effectively as can be, not just across Derby, but also as a patch across the whole of Derby and Derbyshire, and where are the opportunities for shared issues to be considered and addressed across the patch. So I think it is early days, but I think if we look optimistically in terms of bringing those different partners together to look collectively at issues which are, I think, collective problems that not one of the any organisations within the system can address independently. So I think we'll look positively on it until otherwise.
Thank you, Alison. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Yes, I think in principle we should definitely welcome the moves that have been made towards integration, because we know, in fact, we were hearing this again at the Adults and Health Scrutiny Board only last week, that the crises in the NHS are fundamentally caused by the labour shortages in social care, which is actually having a really critical impact on the ambulance service. So, because obviously people are not being discharged from hospital. So it is really important that people do work together to resolve these issues, and hopefully, and also all these issues do interrelate, because health, as we know, isn't determined by how much money we put into a high-tech hospital. It's fundamentally caused by what's more to do with what we eat and how we engage with public health issues. So, so in principle, I think this is a good thing. I would just echo Councillor Repton's point that the integration that we have will not resolve all the resourcing issues we have, and particularly the staffing shortages at the moment. So that's one problem. The other thing that I would just make a general comment on, and I have made this in the Scrutiny Board as well, is that we have now, although we're having this sort of integration, yet again, we've got a quite mesmerising set of boards and structures for any member of the public or even interested layperson looking at this. We've got integrated care systems, integrated care boards, we've got integrated care partnerships. Well, the Derby's version of this is called Joined Up Care Derbyshire. So I would just ask that it be fed back, and I ask this on every opportunity, that the way this, in terms of the aims of this, which is to reduce health inequalities and address some people, particularly BAME communities who've been traditionally excluded, that I know that's a key aim. I think the whole way it's presented to the general public has to be done in a much simpler way, because people will not understand all these different boards and structures. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Lucy.
I have hopes, like everybody else, that this reshuffle of things is going to improve the people's health across Derby and Derbyshire. The talk about the care system and NHS is talked about a lot. What is talked about, I think, less is how public health and the NHS can work more closely together. Obviously, public health was until a few years ago part of the NHS, but it's now part of us as local authorities. And I would like us to be doing more to keep people healthy and to take the burden off the NHS at that end as well as at the care end. And my hope is that that integration can get a higher priority and do more. And as part of that, I think that this board, not the board, the partnership is going to be really important. And in reading through the report here, it seems to me that the integrated partnership has a minimum requirement and not a maximum requirement. And I would hope that, so that it can be a body that people engage with and learn to engage with and want to engage it with, I would like it to be a body that has a balance of political input to it. At the moment, it's the only members who would be on this, are members who would actually, I think, be on the Integrated Care Board as well as on the partnership. And it's a repetition of the same people rather than an expansion of the people within local authorities. So I would like, in the same way as the fire authority or the police committee, I can't remember what it's called these days, have on it a balance of people from different political parties according to the councillors who have been elected for the area. I think it would be useful if this also had a balanced membership. And we could do that by tweaking the draft terms of reference and making sure that the final term of reference allow that to happen. I can't see any reason here that we can't do that, and I would be very happy to propose that we review the terms of reference are amended to allow the inclusion of additional elected members, both from the city and from the county, to deliver a politically balanced membership.
Can I'll just let Alex advise Alison. Do you want to have a quick chat with Alison first of all, Alex, or are you ready to come back in? No, is it possible or is it prescribed?
I think the way the opinion of both the monitoring officer of Derbyshire County Council and Emily as the monitoring officer in Derby is that this joint committee will be discharging executive functions, and therefore it is being established as a joint committee of the two executives, and therefore if that is the legal interpretation, then only cabinet members can sit as members of a joint committee of the executive. However, I assume it will be up to the Integrated Care Partnership to determine how views and opinions are taken on board from other councillors or members of the public when it's developing its proposals. But in terms of the core membership of a joint committee of the executive, that can only be a cabinet member from one of the two authorities.
Okay, I'll bring you back in a second. So my understanding from what you're saying, Alex, it is prescribed in terms of cabinet members, but it may be that the Integrated Care Board may have the flexibility to co-opt other people with regard to pieces of work as they go down. Is that correct? Or does that need to explore more?
I think co-option is something we would have to go away and look at in more detail. But for example, at a cabinet meeting in Derby, opposition members are given speaking rights at the meeting but are unable to vote. Now, there may be some similar arrangement that could be put in place for the ICP potentially. I don't know
if you could just check that out, just to confirm that if that is the case, Alex, I appreciate about what is and isn't possible, but you're suggesting that maybe like we have cabinet now, whilst you wouldn't have the voting rights, possibly, you would have the opportunity to have input into the process.
Yeah, that's correct. And similarly, the ICP is subject to the scrutiny arrangements of both councils. So, obviously, the Adults and Health Scrutiny Board will have an important role in Derby of scrutinising any decisions that are made by the ICP.
If you can come back and confirm that, I think that would be useful. Lucy, I'll quickly take you.
4.21 says that the main statutory function of the ICP is to develop the integrated care strategy, and the Integrated Care Board and local authorities must have due regard to that plan while making decisions. It's the Integrated Care Board that makes decisions and has to include executive cabinet members only. The ICP partnership, as in 4.23, is required to have a minimum membership, and that minimum membership is very minimal. But then you can expect further memberships as we decide to choose. So I think the partnership is the flexible body into which other members can be included, but the board is the one that can only have the executive members. And I'm asking that the partnership, which is what this paper is about, should be constituted in a manner that allows for political balance according to the political balance of councillors across the area.
I understand what you're asking for, Lucy. I mean, we have to be guided by the constitutional officer. I've asked to get firm clarification and come back to us on about what is and what isn't possible. We understand what we want to do is have real input into the process, rights, but that might not. Heidel, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I don't want to prolong this debate, but I think the bit about co-option, we need to be clear, and I think Alex has said that we'll go back to have a look at this. If the partnership, integrated care partnership, has co-option, as is the case sometimes with other agencies, officers joining into the minimum members I identified here, I think we need to know that. And if there are co-option from other organisations and agencies into this partnership, then obviously I think co-option from members from other groups should also be considered. And I think that's something that we should communicate.
Yeah, I thought you make a good point, Hardiel. Alex has taken all that on board, and he'll come back to and advise us accordingly. If there's no more contributions on that one, thank you, Alison. We'll move on to item 9.
Chair, was anybody...
Lucy, quickly then, please.
Was anybody willing to support me in a motion to Cabinet on this?
Sorry?
Was anybody willing to support me in putting a recommendation to Cabinet on this?
Item 9, Castle Ward Urban Village, acquisitions and funding arrangements. Who's taking us through this? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good evening, Catherine Williams. My name's not on the report, but I think most of you have met me before. So I'll briefly run through the report. Obviously, members will appreciate there is a confidential report as well on the agenda, which goes into a lot more detail around the specific numbers involved here and some of the details of the programme. So there'll be the opportunity at that point to discuss in a bit more detail. So the key reason for this report coming to Cabinet is to outline what steps we need to take next to bring forward further phases of development at Castle Ward through our compulsory purchase powers that are now in place. We are seeking approval for revised funding arrangements and changes to the capital programme and approval for the necessary legal steps associated with the compulsory purchase order. And just to be clear, back in November 2019, the Cabinet decision at that point established particular funding parameters and legal parameters for our work at Castle Ward and delegated authority for implementation. For this particular phase, we're beyond those parameters, which is why we need to come back to Cabinet for further approvals. So just a bit of background, I'm sure members will be aware, but we have delivered significant amount already at Castle Ward. There's more than 200 homes have been delivered, with more on site now, and there is also now a new primary school open in the area, a boulevard better connecting the city centre with the railway station, and improved public realm. And we've got a really strong partnership with our developer partner Compendium, and also with Homes England, who provided us with a significant housing infrastructure fund grant to enable all of this to happen. We've also been working hard to support the relocation of businesses in recognition of the fact that new housing will mean displacement of existing businesses and jobs. And for 2 major occupiers who are going to be affected by the Phase 4 housing development, namely Tarmac and Derbyshire County Council's Transport Depot, we have brought landowners and developers together to create an alternative location for them at the former Light Alloy Foundry site in Osmaston, and a planning application is currently under consideration for that development. So in terms of the report detail, Compendium are on site now for Phase 3, so we've been planning for Phase 4 in earnest, and this influences when we actually press the button on the compulsory purchase. The development programme really dictates that. So before pressing that button, we've sought updates to our forecast cost estimates, and primarily due to property values increasing on the back of increased demand for industrial property, we've seen an increase in costs for the next phase. So we've agreed a way forward with our partners Compendium of how we deal with this cost increase. That in essence means Compendium guaranteeing us a particular payment, capital contribution for the land involved in Phase 4, but that does leave a balance of around 330,000, and we're proposing to source that from savings on other schemes within the capital programme, and the report obviously details in the recommendations what's required to do this. So that's the essence of the report, Chair. I'm happy to take questions, and obviously there's an opportunity.
Thank you, Catherine. Before I bring other people in, I want to say we have the costs of the CPA going up at a time when this new flagship estate already has a poor state of security. We've had local people complaining to local councillors about drug dealing and drug problems in the area and other antisocial behaviour. So there are aspects about the current design and security measures on the estate that need addressing, because the fear of local people and local councillors is that you may have an exodus of those people that are actually there at the moment. So whilst the cost of CPA are going up, I think we need to be having those conversations with the developers and others about looking exactly what these problems are and how the developer, and possibly ourselves as well, with expertise of antisocial behaviour experts, how we can deal with and address these problems. Because this is a brand new flagship estate, which is important to the development of this city. And if we're having early teething problems, those teething problems need to be dealt with in an effective manner possible. So if you, I don't know whether you can comment on that, Catherine, or you can talk to others about the concerns of local people as they've been addressed to local councillors.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have raised concerns as shared with myself from the ward member last week with our public protection team. And I've just had a note back today to confirm that there has been work ongoing to talk to local residents. There's been a door knock and questionnaire to establish some of the basis for those concerns and establish some of the data around it. And they've also made changes to some of their patrol strategy as well in the area. So I've literally just received this email today, so there's perhaps more detail in there that we can share with ward members in due course.
I think that's great, Catherine, and I think that will go some way. But maybe it's about the actual, sometimes you have to design things out in terms of like fencing, and about maybe that should have been thought through by the architects in the first place. But it's never too late, I don't believe, to go back with the massive investment there's already been in this estate, and especially with the increased costs of the CPO, for us to go back and raise those expectations, because it's great to have people on the ground, but if there's little nooks and crannies that need to be either fenced off in a hopefully an attractive way, then we should be addressing those. And maybe we need to be going down, talking to local people, talking to the local councillors, and looking at individual hotspots where there are problems to see if we can design our way out of it. Is that okay?
Yes.
Thanks, Catherine.
Certainly, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hardy.
Take that on board.
Yeah, just on that point, I mean, I think you've just received the email, so you can't say. But I think going around with the local councillors in that area, some of the residents who, particularly the public space which goes through the Castlewood estate, the lighting and some of the oversight, because some of the properties are sort of fairly insular and sort of, so that's where the antisocial behaviour and the drug activity happens. And of course, it's very close to the railway station and those streets adjoining onto Castlewood. That sort of the whole space needs to be sort of better lit and better sort of better patrol, really. So those are the sort of things I think I certainly picked up from local residents when I was campaigning down there a few months back. So those are the sort of things that do need to be designed out, particularly in a new initiative in a new area, which with the new properties, which obviously are very attractive, but they can soon go downhill if it's not managed early doors.
And just one quick comment on that, if I may, Chair. In addition to the response from public protection that I outlined, I think absolutely we can involve the developer in a conversation about how we learn the lessons from early phases and what's actually happening on the ground now to make sure that the public realm designs for future phases. I think, to be fair, the public boulevard and the existing square are the most significant spaces you'll see at Castlewood. The rest will be relatively small scale in line with the next phases of development, but we can discuss that with the developer to make sure we learn from that for future phases, certainly.
Thank you, Catherine, for that. Thank you. Lucy.
I'm going to try and look forward here. The finding an extra £250,000 is not easy at the moment, and I just wondered if we'd made approaches to, and whether it would be applicable to be using some of the potential sweetener money, I should call it that, for the combined authority, and whether that would be we'd be eligible to apply for something from there for this.
Would you
Catherine, thank you.
Respond? Yes, thank you. So the proposal for where we source the 300,000 is projected savings from existing capital schemes, which we are comfortable and confident can be achieved within this financial year. There are 2 or 3 schemes that we are currently forecasting will come in below budget by the end of the year. So that's our current strategy. We've also approached Homes England as well as a key partner. But the key issue here, Councillor Kerr, is timing, which is possibly why the combined authority may not be the best route, because we really need to be making a decision now in order to proceed with the compulsory purchase and keep the development programme on track. So I think that's probably the key reason why combined authority money wouldn't be possible.
Chair, I don't want to hold things up, and as the recommendation says, you know, this is what we'll do in the first instance. But the timing doesn't seem too far out to say, actually, we would like to see if we can use some combined authority funding for here, because I know we were looking for quick solutions to do with housing and climate change, and it seems to tick boxes like that. So if we haven't asked, then we're not going to get.
Catherine?
I will double check, but our programme for compulsory purchase means we have to press the button on that by the end of October. That's our timescale. So, but I've not been as involved in the combined authority negotiations, so I would have to take that one away to determine whether there is any money available in that timescale. We're talking the next couple of weeks.
Thanks, Catherine. Catherine said that she should try to be helpful and come back to us on that. Michael? Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with the need to get on with this. The thing I noticed is that the costs have effectively doubled in quite a short space of time, or almost doubled. And from what I know of the economy and building and so on, I think there's quite a lot of risks in this programme. I'm not saying I don't support. I think it's a great idea, and we're getting much needed local housing, including a lot of affordable housing. But I do think we need to keep a very close eye on the finances and crack on with it so the money gets spent before we require more money, Chair. Thank you.
Fair point, Mike. Alison?
Well, thank you, Chair. Mine is just a comment really on the procedures we're experiencing here, and we have experienced the recent meetings I've been in. Councillor Kerr knows that I have huge respect for her, but I would say that she is there are various modes of argumentation, and Councillor Kerr is currently arguing in the sort of classical point where repetition means an assertion of a point, and as an argumentative strategy. So we've seen it at least twice tonight where Councillor Kerr has raised a point, it's been answered, and then what Councillor Kerr does, not much in the guise of altering the point, is to repeat it. So as somebody who's sitting here and also wants my tea, I would just ask that Councillor Kerr accept that an answer is an answer, and repetition is a somewhat often masculine methodology for trying to win an argument by not accepting an answer and repeating your own point. Thank you.
I think you've got that, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Martin's stomach's rumbling. Okay. She hasn't had a tea yet. Okay. Right. Okay. On that, so trying to lighten this a little bit. So if there's no more comments, whether they're legitimate or questionable or whatever, we'll move.
Thank you. So this is the regular report for the compliance with contract, financial and procedure rules. The first item on the in the report is in relation to Chatterstone Wood, the local nature reserve there. In March 2016, we had a Section 106 agreement that was signed in line with the residential scheme of up to 250 dwellings in Oakwood. And that agreement placed a requirement on the developer to pay £112,000 in terms of improvements to Chatterstone Wood and the local nature reserve. The solution here is that we will that we will agree a contribution over a 10-year period to fund improvement works at the local nature reserve in line with the Section 106 agreement, and a capital grant will be provided on an annual basis of £12,000 over the 10-year period to the Friends of Chatterstone Wood Local Nature Reserve in terms of delivering the commitments signed up within that Section 106 agreement. So the recommendations in the report are to approve an addition to the capital programme of £112,000 and to award a grant of £12,000 over the 10-year period to the Friends of Chatterstone Wood Local Nature Reserve. The second item in the report is in relation to a contract waiver to direct award a contract to an organisation called Making Space. And the Council, along with the Integrated Care Board, currently jointly commissions a contract to provide service support to people in the city living with dementia. The current service provider is Making Space, and the service is to enable easy access and appropriate information and advice to individuals living with dementia and their carers. The commissioning of the original contract was done jointly with Derbyshire County Council, and they led on that procurement, although they separately commissioned and re-procured their contract in 2018. There is a drive to align the services under the system of the Joined Up Care Derbyshire Dementia Strategy between the City Council and the County Council in order that we can do a joint procurement in future in terms of that service delivery. In order to do this, we'd need to realign the timing of our commissioning and procurement of the new service with the county. So that would be to start in April 2024. So Cabinet approval is required to waive the requirement for an open tender process as per our contract procedure rules and direct award the contract to the existing provider until 31st of March 2024 so we could align with the county in terms of that recommissioning. The contract value is £175,000 per annum, and there's sufficient budget within the current budget to support that contract continuation. The third item on the report is in relation to the Office of Health Inequalities and Disparities bid, and in returns of a bid for funding and acceptance of funding. So this is part of the government's intention to reduce rough sleeping and address some of the links to substance misuse. And Derby City Council has identified in the top 20 local authorities and given the opportunity to bid for a Local Government Act 23, a Section 31 grant for £638,000 over a 2-year period, and that would need to be spent by March 2024. Currently, Derby City's mission is to deliver by the By-Side programme, which is to tackle substance misuse and rough sleeping using the round 1 funding of the Rough Sleeper Drug and Alcohol Treatment Grant, and it's recommended that this new grant will be awarded to them to continue to deliver the required outputs. So the report is seeking delegated authority to recommend award a grant to Derby City Mission and for delegated authority to the Director of Public Health following consultation with the relevant cabinet member to secure and define the allocations within that grant agreement. The next item on the report is in relation to the Household Support Fund. Now, this is the Household Support Fund 3. So on 22nd of September, the Council was informed of draft allocations for another round of Household Support Fund, which would run from the 1st of October 2022 to the end of the financial year, so the 31st of March 2023. Individual local authority allocations are yet to be confirmed, but we do expect it to replicate our previous allocations over the previous 2 rounds, which is circa £2.2 million. And the Household Support Fund is made available to all county council and unitary authorities to support the most in need with food, energy and water bills. Once the guidelines of the scheme have been received and we've got the grant conditions, we will design the scheme, but there's a proposal in the report to delegate the final details of the scheme to the Strategic Director of People Services and the Cabinet Member for Young People and Skills. There's also an addendum to the report, and that's in relation to the Short Breaks Innovation Funding opportunity. So there's an opportunity here to bid to the Department for Education, a joint bid with Derbyshire County Council in the region of £500,000 to £1 million, and that's for an innovative project to address gaps in in current short breaks for services for children with SEND. The Short Breaks Innovation Fund is a fund of £30 million, and they can be, as I said, they were designated to support break services and novel approaches to integrated delivery of short breaks for children with SEND, and it's to improve health and education and wellbeing outcomes, reduce pressures on high needs and other budgets, and to inform structural reform and the service redesign. The time frame for the applications is really tight. We need to get the bid applications into the DFE by the 4th of November, and the successful applicants will be informed of December of this year. So there's approval in the report to seek approval to develop a bid for this £30 million national pot, and to approve the funding should we be successful in that award. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. I've got a couple of points to make. With regard to the household support, is some of this money to plug the holes in the free school meals voucher scheme? Because I understand that this help and support was reduced from £15 to £10. If this is true, then how can it be justified at a time of soaring costs for food?
You are right. The Household Support Fund's second wave was reduced from the first allocation, and that was primarily because the grant allocation was the same amount, just over 2 million, but the second fund had an additional cohort in there, and that was pensioners, and we awarded an allocation to pensioners on council tax support. From what we're hearing from the third round, so from this allocation, that cohort is no longer part of the grant conditions, so the whole funding will be designed around those individuals and support, not aligned to the pensioner households that the household to support fund contained.
Okay, I'll take that up at Cabinet tomorrow night. With regard to another one on item 10, £638,000 with regard to tackling drug-related aspects of rough sleeping. The question is, do we think this will positively affect the numbers of those with drug problems on the streets in our city centre?
Maybe I could answer that question. The grant is awarded to undertake an activity called trauma-informed navigation. And what trauma-informed navigation is to almost hold the hand of individuals who hitherto have not entered into drug treatment because they're too complex and have a set of requirements that require this additional support. That grant is therefore not designed to minimise visible antisocial behaviour in the city centre. It's primarily designed to encourage those individuals to access treatment and make sure they stay in treatment, drug treatment being part of a package of measures required to reduce their antisocial behaviour.
I've got some questions around that, Chair. Would it be better if I just would defer those until we're on to the next item, which is about setting up the partnership around this, or because it's about that specific funding and that activity related to the funding rather than the partnership itself?
I'm happy to, with your permission, to try and answer any questions that anybody has. So I've no.
If the meeting is happy with that, I mean, ideally, I'd like to keep them separated out if we can. But if it's felt that there's such a strong link, we need to discuss them at the same time. I mean, I'll be guided by the meeting.
I'm not trying to discuss them at the same time, Chair. I'm just saying that I've got some questions, and I didn't know whether you wanted to just note these points that Alison's raised, or whether I could just ask now about the funding and the way it's going to be used for this particular project, which I am aware of because I've spoken to the Director of Public Health about it.
Richard, are you comfortable answering that at this stage?
I'll answer any question that,
okay.
I am able to answer, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, just to say that I think we should welcome this money to the city, because I know from talking to people who work in alcohol abuse that it's very, very much needed, and we haven't had it. We haven't had the money to do this kind of work. So that is absolutely fantastic. There's a couple of concerns. One, mine would be, having talked to people who try and, often on a voluntary basis, try and help people who are recovering alcoholics or who are kind of floating around in a drinking too much scenario, but aren't really at the point of needing treatment. There's a lot of concern that actually, I'm not denying and saying this, that there is a big need for treatment places, but there are so many people who ideally could do with some support before they're at that point of needing formalised treatment. I don't know if there's any I think the money is prescribed for that, as I understand, is it? I don't know if there's anything that could be done around that more preventative approach. And the other concern, I think, I just wondered around this is ongoing funding, because I know that was in doubt. So I just wondered if you could tell us at this point if there's any update on the prospective year's funding for this. Thank you.
Richard, do you want to deal with each one, or do you want me to take Hardiel and John's, or do you want to deal with each one as we go along? Is that easier for you?
I'm more than happy to take a coalition of questions and maybe make an appropriate statement. Yeah.
John, and then Hardiel.
Yeah, Chair, mine was really about the household support fund, I'm afraid. Just to ask Alison, when we have some details, could the report come to scrutiny, CYP scrutiny, please, for household support fund? No, that's a question for Stephen.
There probably will be an issue in terms of timing, because the household support fund does come into effect pretty quickly. It does run from October until March, so it will just be about the physical timing of getting that scrutiny arrangement in place and actually proceeding with the support that we need. So yeah. I don't know if
I'm not suggesting we see it before it happens.
Rather than formal scrutiny.
Yeah, I'd just like to know what the details, what's actually happening, who's getting what, etc.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, back to the rough sleeping drug and alcohol treatment grant. I mean, I think it's welcome. I mean, my experience is that this is good practice, which is pioneered in Durham. I think where navigators, and it is about prevention. It's I think Richard will answer that question. I mean, we should welcome this, because this funding adds more to the sport. As a report later on says, adds support to people who are experiencing drug and alcohol issues, and which has led to them to be homeless as well. So they need navigating. So, you know, these are for individuals who support people through the whole process, so that they get the treatment and the access all the things. So I think we should really welcome this. It has been tested out in Durham. And that was a partnership between the Chief Constable of Durham, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Durham, and the local health service, public health. And it's been shown that it can make a difference. What we need to do is implement it here, although I see the deadlines are pretty short in terms of spending the money later on. So implement it, and if it does work, we need to find out how to maintain that funding longer term. But from my experience, it's a very good initiative. The Navigator initiative is a good initiative. The only thing I'll ask Richard is that who will be the navigators? Which agencies will they be coming for? Do we know that? I know it's a question for the later paper, but it'd be very helpful to understand that. Thank you.
Right, Richard, do you want to come back to Alison's points, and then anything with regard to Hardiel was just raised?
Thank you, Chair. Picking up on Alison's initial point, the grants that Alison describes are specific grants from a newly established team in the government called the Rough Sleeper Drug and Alcohol Treatment Team, and they have been established as part and parcel of the government's strategy to reduce homelessness by 2025. So that's a specific cachet of money aimed at tackling some of the most complex individuals, recognising that they require hand-holding to make them enter into drug and alcohol treatment. There are other sums of money, such as, and apologies for all these horrible acronyms, such as the Supplemental Substance Misuse Treatment and Recovery Grant, which the Council has received and received last year and receives this year and for the next 2 years to tackle things that you're describing, and that is a range or a continuum that starts off with prevention in the world of alcohol, goes into community treatment, and ends up at what I like to call the Amy Winehouse factor, which is residential rehabilitation and inpatient detox. So there is funding outside of what Alison has described to deal with prevention, and I wholeheartedly agree that it is much easier to prevent people from becoming problematic alcohol users than it is to treat them subsequently. And speaking to Harlow's point, many thanks. I agree with you that this is a tried and tested model of trauma-informed navigation, and the current provider is Derby City Mission, who also delivers the safe space, and that is the intended direction of travel, that they will continue to deliver this because they'll be delivering it already for a year. Thank you, Richard. I think we'll segue quite well into the next item. But before we do, Lucy always comes in at the in Fergie time, but Alison, thank you.
Chair,
No, I'll bring you in a second. Nicola.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so just to confirm then, this is additional money from the government that should be welcomed. It's an increase on provision to Derby City Council to help tackle this problem. Is that correct? Absolutely, yeah. It's a specific grant that Derby was, as Alison points out, Derby was recognised as being in the top 20 within the country of having an excessive number of people who are designated rough sleepers or at risk of rough sleeping. And as such, we were allowed to bid for a grant to tackle that. So, yeah, it's new money. Thank you, Richard. Lucy.
Thank you. And one of my questions partly relates to that, and the other one relates to the Local Nature Reserve. I hope there's two simple questions. The first one is that Chad Wood was suggesting £12,000 for 10 years, which apparently totals 112,000. But 10 years times 12,000 is 120,000. So I just wanted to know what was actually happening in the sums. Is there a rounding up error, a rounding down error? Is it taking into effect an estimate of inflation? Does anybody know? I don't want Cabinet to approve something that doesn't work financially.
It will be due to roundings. It will be rounded up to 112, but I will just make sure that that's right for Cabinet tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. The second point, Chair, is regarding this new grant, which I very much welcome. I think it's I think the support that we can give to people to get them out of drug and alcohol cycles is really important. And I'm sure that Derby City Mission are going to continue to do a good job in the work that they're doing there. But I don't understand why there isn't also a mention of a waiver for this. Is there a reason why this isn't a waiver?
Richard, can you help us at that point?
To my understanding, this isn't a tender. This is an awarding of a grant, and the grant awarding process has been followed, and the authorities have been, or the request is for the authorities to be delegated to the appropriate Cabinet member in order to award that grant.
My concern, Chair, is that we are awarding a grant to a specific body who haven't previously had this money. So it's not a continuing contract. It's a new contract to a body who we're already working with. No. But we could have gone to some other body to ask them to work with it.
Richard? No, they're currently receiving the phase one of the grant. They received the first phase of the grant last year, established a service, and then the government released two more, a second phase, which is 2 more years. It's the same project being delivered by the same person that's doing it, and the cost of change would be prohibitive.
Sorry, I'm not suggesting we should change, but it's just a question of procedure, that for sometimes you need waivers, and I didn't know why we didn't need a waiver in this instance.
Alison?
You only need a waiver for a procurement process in terms of a tendering process. This is a grant allocation, so you just need approval to award a grant.
Thank you for that clarification, Alison. Thank you. Okay, unless somebody just puts their hand up as we've moved on. Item 11, please. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully this is relatively straightforward. The paper seeks Cabinet approval to enter into a county-wide strategic partnership, and that's a strategic partnership aimed at tackling drug and alcohol harms. The paper seeks permission to enter into that partnership and also authority for the Strategic Director of People in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Adults and Health to award or direct somebody from this, the council to enter into that partnership and represent them. Some backgrounds to this is that last year in December, the government launched a new strategy, From Harm to Hope, and that strategy is a 10-year plan aimed at reducing the harms caused by drug and alcohol. Part and parcel of the strategy is that local areas at an appropriate size footprint, that being Derbyshire County, should form a strategic partnership constituted of members from the Integrated Care Board, Integrated Care Partnership, the other NHS providers, Police and Crime Commissioner, senior police officers and local authorities, and in doing so they should come together and assess the harms caused across the county by substance misuse and subsequently direct organisations to make policy within their own organisation. There's quite a bit of detail in the report as to the aspirations of the government's drug strategy, but basically the government have decided that their strategy will form 3 strands, and that is to break the supply of drugs, which is a criminal justice oriented strand, by targeting organised crime, to deliver world-class treatment by investing in treatment services, as we've discussed just moments ago, and also to achieve a generational shift in the demand for drugs, which is working in school settings and working with traditional members of the public to deter them from taking drugs. This partnership that we've described will oversee the implementation of that drug strategy and those 3 elements of that drug strategy at a local level. I think that's enough.
Thank you, Richard. Alison.
Thank you very much for that. Forgive me if this should be obvious, but in terms of determining the council's appointments to the partnership as appropriate, that is fairly vague. I mean, does it have to be vague at this stage? I mean, are we referring to officers, or does it mean councillors, or what does that mean, and how many appointments are envisaged, please?
I'll take Hardiel as well and come back to both. Hardiel, thank you.
I think the idea of the partnership is really positive, but delivery is the main issue. Is there funding which is going to be attached to this? Because having better coordinated partnership and working in a joined up way is always welcome, and it looks good on paper, but without the right resources, it won't be as effective as it can be. And do you know how much work the strategy talks about? Because a lot of the issues are in central government in terms of different departments doing the joined up work, which is in this partnership, which is sort of in the terms of reference of this partnership, which is all positive and needs to be done. But that can't be done without the additional funding to make it happen, because otherwise we'll be just talking around the same things. But the other thing is, this is also reliant on government departments also joining up, and that is historically not been very effective.
Right, okay. Richard, if you could address Alison's points and Hardiel's questions. Thank you.
If I could address Hardiel's first, because it's the easiest. The government has established in central government something called the Joint Combating Drugs Unit, which has representatives of all government departments, so that there is cross-government department discussion in respect of the things that you're describing, but I absolutely agree it's fundamentally flawed when people operate in silos. And the second part of the question, or the first part, is yes, there is funding coming to the local authority for enhancement of drug treatment. This strategic line, we're going to have a world-class treatment system. That is the Supplemental Substance Misuse Treatment and Recovery Grant on top of the Public Health Ring Fence Grant. So yes, there's money coming to the council. There are pockets of money from the Ministry of Justice and from the Department of Education that are going to respective organisations. So they're not coming to the council, they'll be going to the police and to the prisons and maybe to schools, but I'm not sure on that. We don't access that money or influence it, but this partnership theoretically should be able to make decisions on resource allocation, so that they should act as a cross-departmental function at a local level. And speaking to Councillor Martin's point, I'll defer to my colleague Alex in relation to constitutional issues, but the paper seeks to give the authority to the Strategic Director of Peoples and the Cabinet Member in order for them to choose whether they themselves are represented on this or they ask somebody else to be represented on this. The actual constitution of the partnership, if I'm going into very boring detail now, there will be a county-wide partnership which is of executive officers, although this is not formally constituted like the paper that Alison and Alice were talking about. And then there will be place-based delivery groups. There'll be a place recognised as the county and a place recognised as the city that will have other officers, but that didn't need to be designated through a cabinet procedure.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, if there's any other is, yes, Lucy, thank you.
Thank you. I want to pick up again on the form this new partnership will take. I think it's a really good way forward, and I wish it's the best we can hope for it, because it's a way that we can make a real difference. The 4.7 talks about the partnership having elected members, which I very much welcome, that can represent the views of all tiers of authority, so presumably district, borough, as well as unitary county. And again, can we ask that as that is being put together, we include political balance amongst the members that are being included in that partnership?
I don't know if Richard or Alex. Richard?
I'll defer to Alex, because that's outside of my sphere of influence. That's a constitutional issue. But
so, Alex, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's perhaps some conflation between the report that we discussed earlier on the agenda and this one here. So the report earlier was a formally constituted joint committee of the two upper-tier councils in Derbyshire to form the ICP. This is the establishment of a partnership which falls some way short of that. In our scheme of delegations, entering into partnerships is a matter that's reserved to the council cabinet. Now it is for the cabinet and also other decision makers around the county to determine the form and composition of this drug and alcohol partnership to best achieve its stated aims. I think forming it as a joint committee in the same way as the ICP would probably not achieve what anyone wants to achieve from this organisation. It would tie it up in some of the governance procedures that exist around our constituted meetings. But it's fully within the gift of this scrutiny committee to recommend that elected members are represented on the eventual makeup of the strategic partnership, and that membership reflects political balance. And then that is for the cabinet member and the strategic director to consider in their role in constituting this partnership in due course. I think in governance terms, the partnership will be established via some sort of partnership agreement that is drafted up between the authorities, rather than anything that sits within our constitution as a council.
So it's within the remit of this committee if we wish to do that, if somebody wanted to make that recommendation, Lucy?
I'm very happy to recommend that to our cabinet.
Okay, well, just before we come back to that, Alison...
Anybody would like to support me this time?
Yeah, okay, we'll come back to your possible recommendation. I'll ask Alison to contribute.
On this particular one,
sorry, Alison, could you start again, please?
Sorry. I was just indicating to say that in this particular case, I would support a recommendation from Councillor Kerr to that effect.
Chair, could I offer some words of counsel?
You certainly can, Richard. Thank you.
The partnership that we've described in the paper will possibly meet once every 6 months and be comprised, as Alex has eloquently described. There would be a better use of elected members' time if they focus their energies on the place-based partnership, which is specific to Derby City. And this will be, how do we translate the funding and the resources for Derby City at a place base? So all of the things we've discussed today, that can have elected members and various other people as we see fit whereas the other partnership board, so to speak, may be less productive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think Richard, well, I don't think I know, Richard's trying to be positive and helpful in terms of making a recommendation, how we get the biggest bang for our bucks as elected members. So do you want to reflect on that, Lucy, when you make the recommendation, bearing in mind you need Councillor Martin's support for that to be seconded?
Chair, I'm being very much guided by this paragraph 4.7, which is referring to elected members that can represent the views of all tiers of authority. And my feeling is that elected members, to get a good spread of opinions and experience from elected members, that needs to be not just all tiers of authority, but from different political groupings as well. So I think to get that strategic view and to get big thing, it isn't just people who are working on a day-to-day basis with that theme that is important, but also people who have got experience at all levels to bring to that strategic thinking.
The committee will hear all recommendations. I guess that I think Richard is saying rather than just be sort of sidetracked to some meeting in Glossop where you might not be able to affect what goes here in Derby, you might want to focus, and he's nodding, you might want to focus specifically on issues that we can affect in a positive way. If one's happy to travel to Glossop and talk about things that are going on in New Mills, then that's fine. But yeah, I take Richard's recommendation, but it's up to us whether we take his advice or not. Alison, do you want to...
Well, my point would simply be, the reason, I think the paper says that it's up for the cabinet member and the strategic director to determine who takes part in this partnership, and that's fair enough. But actually, so we're now being asked to agree with that, and I suppose, from my point, it's not so much this idea that we're really, really focused on political balance at this kind of thing. It's more that actually, cabinet member for adults and health may have all sorts of interests, but may not actually have, unlike some people in this room do, actually an awful lot of experience of dealing with drugs and strategic issues around drugs, and they may not be the cabinet member. So I think I just think it's what I would hope. So I'd support a recommendation along these lines. It's not about the internal politics of it at all. It's about, as Councillor Kerr said, it's just about making sure that we can, through the council's procedures here, get somebody in at the strategic level who actually understands and has worked with people with drugs. And we do have councillors who have that to offer, especially, in the city.
That executive scrutiny asks that in formulating the makeup of the members of the partnership, the cabinet member gives due consideration to ensuring that there is a political balance across the elected members, reflecting the balance of elected members across the county.
I totally disagree with this recommendation. It's not a political forum. It should be people, relevant officers, relevant experience and strategic decision making. I think we're trying to over politicise it and come back and get involved in things that we need to let officers and people in the know get on with their jobs and do it properly.
Well, it isn't quite, the risk of being also guilty of splitting hairs, it isn't quite the recommendation I would, because the issue is not so much political balance, it's this idea that the cabinet member, not a lack on their part, may not be much. But I'm happy to. I said I would support the recommendation, so I will, but only on the basis that the point is that many councillors from the city do really know about how to deal with these issues, and I think it is worthwhile having the opportunity for those people to put themselves forward for something as important as this at a strategic level. So I will back the recommendation.
Sorry. Chair, may I pick up that point and add a point at the end to enable groups to select the most appropriate members with the most appropriate experience to participate?
Councillor Kerr's trying to inject the committee system into something which it just literally isn't relevant at all. This is a strategic partnership. She's not going to get someone from the Lib Dems selected for this unless they run the authority and they're the leadership and the cabinet member. Full stop. I'm sorry, but that's the reality of it.
If we're all in agreement, Chair, with what's been
Are you all in agreement?